Okay, scrimmage notes, quotes, some unofficial stats from Saturday at Snapdragon Stadium. Aztecs begin week 3 of their fall football camp program, and one of my personal favorites, a segment that takes a look on defense between the tackles. Steve Perez here with Aztecs All In, and we have Randy Scovil along momentarily, who also took in the proceedings. Aztecs scrimmaged in front of a modest crowd at Snapdragon Stadium. They ran some plays with people looking on Saturday, but more of an opportunity for the team to get some more practice in the pads, the uniforms, the full contact. Projected skill starters making brief appearances, or in the case of the Aztecs, number 1 running back Lucky Sutton, not at all. Randy and I had a bit of a chat after the scrimmage in the shadow of the San Diego Trolley in Mission Valley. Randy pinched the name for the segment from Jerry Seinfeld. He calls it Sportscasters in Cars Talking Football. Who are these people? And what's the deal with the airline peanuts? Have a listen.
My very first question from that, Randy, was who won?
Well, I think the Aztecs did. It's interesting because there were some, in our talking, you observed the defense made some stops. And usually, as you would think, the defense is ahead at this time of year, although the offense has a lot of people back. Some people, not participating, Lucky Sutton being held out as a precaution, but also given that this is a public scrimmage, you expect it to be pretty vanilla, and I'm really not going to be surprised if the Portland State game ends up being exactly the same way. But I think they're really kind of trying to figure out who's going to be in the mix. When we heard Coach Lewis talk afterwards, he mentioned, they felt pretty good about it. And I think one of the benefits in there that's kind of a hidden benefit is the absence of that second transfer portal, meaning not having to worry about people leaving after spring, getting a bunch of new people acclimated. I mean, you've got the first-time freshmen who probably won't mix in too much early on, but I think they're probably farther along, and that was something that he cited, that for this many practices in 3 weeks out from the first game, things are looking pretty good. I mean, we can break down some of the individual things that we saw, but overall, obviously, we're talking about Jaden Denegal. What were some of your impressions of his play?
Well, it seemed, as you said, pretty plain vanilla, and it was interesting that there were a couple of stops very early on when he was the guy behind center. And there was one sort of a mix-up between him and a back on an RPO where it was after the play was over, and he ended up keeping up. And of course, it's a scrimmage, and he's got the no-touch jersey on, so it was just a tag, and you're done with the play. But then they were having a conversation about who was supposed to get the ball. I thought you were supposed to get it. But it's not that big a deal. I'm remarking on it, but it's the kind of thing they try to iron out, I'm sure, going on through. The other thing I just thought was noteworthy is that everybody on that field had the pads over their helmets, so they weren't going to risk any sort of injury, concussion. We've already, I guess you mentioned that they held Lucky out. And before the game, Coach Lou met with a bunch of folks at the Cox Business Center, and he said, hey, he's one of our toys, and we're not going to break our toys right now. And the only person who talked after the scrimmage was Coach Lou. So he had his talk and said, yeah, I wasn't happy about it, but, it is what it is. Then the other thing I thought was interesting was the receiving corps. And last season, the Aztecs were pretty great, actually, moving that football on the ground. Through the air, not so much. And we found out later it was because Denny had some issues going on with the shoulder. That was one issue. And then they had some injuries to some receivers that they were relying on midway through the season. Plus, they were blessed with a very experienced offensive line and some talented running backs, and they did. They ran it on ball. But now, hopefully, some more emphasis on moving the football through the air this season.
I think so. I think they're looking for different ways, to figure out who's going to be in the mix. I mean, certain people are being held out, because they know they're going to play. They know, it's kind of Coach Lewis said that, Lucky Sutton's going to be playing plenty of football. There was not a concern there. I think even though looking at the depth chart at the beginning, when we went to that first open day of practice and today, there has been a little bit of movement in there, as you would figure, with the offensive line a bit. The receivers, I think some of that also folks being held out. I think there's a little more experience. I think they would, and maybe this is because of Coach Lewis's former position. I think we might see tight ends featured a little bit more, even though it's been generally 11 personnel. They are doing a lot more with the tight end. We did see 4 different people get some action today, and just looking at, where is the tight end, could be on the wing, could be tight to the line in the backfield. They actually had them in split out as part of a trips formation at one point. And that can also be good too, if they're trying to go tempo where you're giving lots of different looks, but not having to swap out personnel. That having been said, I think, they are going to look for some different guys, some different kind of receivers to catch the ball. I think, obviously in that conversation, we would talk a bit about Bert Emanuel, who, has the background in the offense, comes from a receiver family, but there's obviously that advantage you have, especially when things break down as a former quarterback. You're knowing kind of what the quarterback's going for, how to get yourself open, and maybe in a little 3D chess, knows the offense, knows where everybody else is as well. Normally, that's something just the quarterback would know, but I think that is a nice side benefit for Emmanuel out there. And that was somebody who had moved out the depth chart. He started the scrimmage today, after being listed initially as a third team guy. So I think that one, it's not a matter of, is he going to factor in? It's going to be when, and you can.
It was pretty clear
Yeah.
from the way they ran plays for him early on, and I was very interested in seeing that he came up with 3 or 4 pretty good catches right out of the gates. One of them was a pretty tough one, and we asked Coach Sean Lewis afterward about his performance, and we have a little soundbite from that, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, it was good to see, right? He's working really hard at the craft. All of it's really new. His development has really started to hit an uptick because, again, there's some base things that you just don't know what you don't know when you make that change, right? Like when I went from quarterback to tight end, it's like a whole new world, like Aladdin and Jasmine. Yikes. So for him, it's very much the same thing. He's settling into it. And, obviously second time, third time through the install with it all. So now he's able to get his cleats in the ground, recognize and react to his pre and post snap reads. His quarterback background and his work ethic is exceptional, and it allows him to be in position to be successful. And I don't think anyone over the offseason caught more balls off the jugs than him, right? I mean, so we talked about that when the transition happened, to where he was just going to have to accumulate repetitions on that, and he did. So ball on hands, he's got a big catch radius, got a big frame. Obviously, we know he's got some physical traits, and excited to see, again, his continued development under the tutelage of Coach Mid.
And then after that, followed up with a question about the advantage of being a former quarterback and whether that played a role in that. And here's what Lewis had to say about that.
Well, as a former quarterback myself, I think those guys are pretty exceptional. Yeah, obviously he sees it from both sides, right? He's got good understanding. He's got a good feel. When you've been the guy in the pocket, you really understand, the timing of when the ball needs to get out of your hand and the location of where you want the receivers to be. And I think too often, we don't recognize how everything needs to be so fine-tuned and in sync, again, not to wear out this engine analogy, right? But like, for it to really hum, everything's got to be firing and operating together, right? And so the line's got to protect it, the quarterback's got to ID it properly, the tight ends and the backs have to be in sync. Are you getting man coverage? Are you getting zone coverage? Are we recognizing it and seeing it the same way? And then again, at the end of the day, can we hit the top of our drop, throw on time, on rhythm? Are the receivers at the other end of the equation where they need to be based off the routes that they had to get, so that they can be in those spots, we can get the ball out of hand and then, play catch? And it seems like such a basic thing, right? But there's so much that has to happen, which makes us the most beautiful team game that there is. But when you have a quarterback background, I think you have a greater appreciation of all the things that are going on within the pocket and the urgency that you have to work with on the edge, as opposed to just when you've played, on the edge your whole life and you haven't had a 3 technique cut loose, barreling down on you. Like, until you've experienced that, it's kind of hard to replicate.
I think the other thing too about Emmanuel is, and I'm sure that was not going to be unmasked today, is you look at somebody who is a quarterback, so there's obvious trick play possibilities. They did one, but he wasn't the receiver who threw it. But you're also remember from the bowl game, well, what did Bert Emanuel do out of the gun? He can run with the ball. So I think a lot of stuff.
Dangerous with the football. So
Absolutely.
like that, it'd be very exciting to see how they can get that ball to him because he can do work with his feet.
Well, I think you get the sweeps out of motion, but clearly too, we saw a lot today. The bubble screens, we saw a lot of those last year. Denegal can get the ball out quickly and accurately. That's something where, you get these receivers in space that can, without having to go too far down the field with the ball, you can make some things happen with this receiving core.
Right. And then Stone Saunders was out there at quarterback after Denny got his work in. And he was fairly impressive at spots and found a deep ball. Also then directed some drives down that seemed very productive for the offense. And he's finding his way directing this offense, but he has the skills.
He does. And he's looking to press a little bit. Trying to work on the accuracy in there. And I think there is a possible concern where you would say, what if, not to say that it would, but if something happens, Denegal can't go and it's early in the season, the process with Saunders maybe isn't to the point where maybe if you have to start somebody else, maybe not mid-game, but starting the next game, does Bert Emanuel slide back over, knowing that, you have an experienced backup?
That'd be a nice luxury to have, and maybe the Aztecs are hoping that they don't have to find that out. And I would say to you, considering what JD went through last year to stay on the football field, it would have to be a pretty severe injury. He'd have to be sitting around in traction to keep him off the football field this season, not just that how tough he is.
I would agree with that. But again, he is really key to the offense. And I think we know that he has the running ability as well. I think we intentionally did not see a lot of RPO today. I think there's going to be some things and some throws that maybe they're going to develop off of that we'll probably start to see in maybe game 2 when we talk a little bit about the schedule later on.
But all in all, 1+. Didn't see anyone carted off due to injury. Might have to follow up and find out if there were any. I think, like you alluded to, the receivers, probably Jacob Bostic is one of those guys that are just kind of doing a load management on. They know what he can do, and they don't want to expose him too much. Saw Donovan Brown out there catching some balls and getting some playing work in, and they look pretty stacked at running back. And they have a lot of other capable wide receivers, so it's a matter of we'll find out more this week when we get a chance to talk to the offensive line coaches and the players to see how they're going to be able to protect that quarterback and so he can operate.
Yeah, and the lack of injuries, that kind of goes back to the original question of yours, who won the scrimmage? Well, Aztecs did.
Right.
They didn't lose anybody.
They won because they didn't lose anybody. At least no one got carted off.
And Randy, before moving on to our discussion of the non-conference schedule ahead, here's a quick look at some of the unofficial stats from the scrimmage, courtesy of Jamie McConaughey and his crew in communications and media relations for the Aztecs. We thank them. The quarterback room showed 2 different looks. Senior starter Jaden Denegal, efficient, clean, 11 of 13 for 83 yards, 0 INTs. Backup Stone Saunders pushed the ball downfield a bit more, 9 of 18 for 96 yards. The one interception of the night came off his arm. Sophomore transfer safety Isaiah Green stepped in front, took it 26 yards the other way for a touchdown. On the ground, number 2 back Christian Washington carried 6 times, 13 yards. The 2 rushing scores came from Jordan Thomas on a 3-yard run. True freshman Josiah Lucas broke free for a 25-yard touchdown. Javian Kennard led all rushers with 16 carries for 55 yards. Through the air, Nathan Acevedo caught 6 passes for 21 yards. Bert Emanuel Jr., former QB, still learning the receiver position, had the big night among the pass catchers, 4 receptions for 49 yards, including, as we mentioned, a couple of those contested leaps. Parker Threat hauled in a 40-yarder from Saunders. True freshman Carson Deal of La Jolla High School added 4 catches for 25 yards. Defensively, the tackle leaders were Dean Harrington, Cameron Cooper, Sion Hala, each with 5 stops. Malachi Finau, Gavriel Lightfoot, Tua O'Toi'ili, and several others sat at 4 apiece. Finau and Gavriel each logged 2 tackles for loss, while To'ilili added 1.5. The defense was credited with 9 sacks for 38 yards, but keep in mind those are nominal numbers. It was a scrimmage setting. The QBs protected with touch rules rather than full contact. One final note, and we will probably have more on that in upcoming podcasts. It really matters heading into the season. The field goal competition, the place kicker remains wide open. The Aztecs lost a mighty reliable lefty, Gabe Placencia, to graduation. A big kicking shoe to fill there. He left as the school's career leader in field goal percentage. 4 different kickers made kicks on Saturday, all connected from 35 yards and beyond. That battle, though, still very much alive. As a group, they made 4 of 6, including one of those infamous doinks right off the crossbar and bouncing straight back onto the field.
We're going to wrap up this discussion about the scrimmage, but one of the things that was important about getting the community out there and saying people can come in for free was to try to get a bit more interest from people who are going to make a season commitment to some season tickets. Of course, that is one of the 12th man trying to help spur the Aztecs on, and they were able to win all those games last year, and one of it was because of the stout defense, but they did have a pretty good crowd at home for some of these games. That's the impetus for something like this. It's a chance for people to come check out the stadium and maybe dig down deep and make a commitment. I think the last number I heard was close to 9,000, maybe I think it was 8,500 season ticket commitments, and certainly they would like to see more of that. And then as far as the turnout today, I think the rough guesstimate was somewhere between 1,500 and maybe 2,000. It's kind of hard for me to judge that, but a lot of folks on the home side of the stadium and people there sitting in seats. Of course, I had the opportunity, the co-creator of this podcast, Louis Wiener, found a spot down front in the plaza right next to the Cox Business Center, and we sat there and hung out, and great seats. And he said he was immediately accosted or fed upon and mentioned, of course, that we do have these season seats elsewhere in the stadium, not quite as close and tight in, but we have our seats, and so do you.
Yeah, mine aren't quite as close, but mine are strategically located. I do like the all 22 view. So it'll be my 3rd year as a season ticket holder. I'm looking forward to it. I think the environment is great. I also like the idea, as they did at times last year, of season ticket holders getting the extra seats. I did claim those for Portland State. As it turns out, my daughter wanted to come down for Labor Day weekend, so it's perfect. She's going to go to the game, but also doing ticket promotions like getting people in for Cal, which not only it was a great opponent, but it was, pretty much the best end-to-end performance of the year. And that is, at least in the time I've been back down here, the one time you really start to get that feel that, hey, this is kind of cool, starting to approach that feeling you get in Viejas where, okay, this is special. We've got a lot of people here. So I think part of that is, and interestingly, you kind of see that change where football season tickets went down, basketball tickets, which I also have, went up. But I think that a lot of that is, you got to get people in the stadium, because I think that was the lesson of the Cal game. If you get people in, they have a good time. Also helps if there's not a pennant race going on at the same time.
Right.
But you have that, then people are going to come back, making it the kind of event it can be. And we know that in our past lives, in that same location, different building,
not the same stadium anymore.
Interesting things can happen. It can be a great experience. I think with the students, the student population continuing to grow and more trying to build out that Mission Valley campus. I think it will be good, but there's no reason why that can't get started now. A lot of momentum was cost by, obviously not having a stadium, having to do the Carson thing. But now, you've got a winning season. You've got, a coach who will be out there and promote things, really, has a lot of, trying to bring positive energy and, get something going. Because I think everybody knows there's such a void here for football that also means there's a tremendous opportunity.
Well, yeah, and that was the whole idea behind promoting and hiring a guy like Sean Lewis, who likes the no huddle and has used that whole fast moniker, which, yes, everything gets done fast, but I like what it stands for, which is focused and accountability and smart and tough. So that's all great
Yeah,
stuff.
it can mislead people because it isn't a hurry up offense,
Right.
but there is opportunity to, like we were talking earlier, engage in tempo where, you're doing a lot of things with the same personnel. You can suddenly gear shift that, but it's not necessarily the default mode, but it's something you can go to quickly to, take the initiative in a game.
But yeah, and you can see the point of doing the no huddle. Is the point these days is scoring. If that's what fans want to see, if you want to get more touches, run more plays, that's what you got to do. You got to run no huddle. So, want to discuss the out of conference preseason, so to speak?
Yeah, I will say it's going to be interesting. Portland State, because from doing Cal Poly, that was a team we would play and go visit. I think it's unfortunate what has happened there. In fact, they've got another coaching change there after a 1-11 season last year. That they have
a serious bad for them.
Well, they have serious venue issues because it's unfortunate in that it's a downtown campus. It's actually in a really interesting spot, but the soccer team basically maneuvered them out of the cool old stadium where they used to play. They play out in the suburbs now in a kind of a community field. They play in the Big Sky, which is definitely one of the top FCS conferences. So, they're facing a lot of competition. I think they have the ability to pull some people in. And I think with a new coaching staff, they're going to pull the stops out. But I think obviously a lot of people are looking ahead to week 2 at the Rose Bowl. You have UCLA, which has undergone some changes. And interestingly enough, you have a coach who came from the week 3 opponent, James Madison. I thought that was a really good get to get that team and to get them here, even though a lot of those folks are now in Westwood. I think, a good road showing, those are 2 name opponents. I think there's some real opportunity for the Aztecs there, and I think they'll be thinking about that. Toledo has always been a very solid MAC team, maybe off just a little bit, but Coach Lewis, as you mentioned, is somebody who knows
against the MAC. Yeah,
he knows the MAC.
Yeah.
Well, Coach Lewis is part of a very exclusive club, which is known as People Who Won at Kent State.
I keep hearing that,
and it's very much the case. So I think there's a really good, strong non-conference, because you figure there's going to be an FCS team in there.
Right.
You've got a good conference, or I should say non-conference, a good P4 team, which obviously, and also it's a nice, efficient, economical trip just to go up to LA. You got a really good, and I'm sure, you get a good return game for this as well, with James Madison going out, getting some exposure in the MAC. I think it's pretty good. And that's a team that came up from FCS not that long ago. And then, later we'll talk about, how the Pac-12 shakes out. But I think, too, that there's going to be a nice offering for season ticket holders this year, because we were talking about getting people in. One other thing I will just close on that I mentioned to you, which I think is great and is very San Diego, night games.
Correct.
We have night games. We just have the one 4:30 game. I think it's Washington State. Everything else is starting in the evening, as it should be.
Night football in San Diego. That's great. And I say if they can come through that 4-game stretch at 3-1, that would be ideal. 2-2 wouldn't be bad either. So that would be the minimus, I think, of those first 4 games.
I think so. And again, like a lot of the things we were talking about, the transfer portal, the turnover, we really don't know. I think, as we get a game or 2 in, it'll be a lot easier to get a bead on folks. But for now, still any day of the week, beating UCLA as an Aztec fan is a good thing. Coming in and you get James Madison here after a cross-country trip. I agree with you. I think 3-1 would be good, and I think it's really doable.
Right, and they have a history of going up to Pasadena and winning a game or 2 in the past. I've seen it done. Okay, well, let's move on to the rest of this podcast, which I believe has to do with the defensive line. I should know. I put it together.
No doubt this year's Aztecs defense on paper a bit of a question mark with the loss of significant production on the edges from last year. A lot of sacks transferred or graduated. How well those assigned to anchor this defense's interior will go a long way toward determining whether the 2026 version of the San Diego State Aztecs football team can match last year's, which featured 3 shutouts and 4 other games where the other side scored only a field goal or a single touchdown. And that's one of the major reasons why that team won 9 games last season. The Aztecs defense, statistically last year, the number 6 scoring defense in the nation. Biggest key to any defense is how that group plays up front. We discussed edges last episode, and in this one, we move to the interior, where the battle for the line of scrimmage first starts. The unit led by starting nose Malachi Finau, who is often found not far from the opponent's center, and the transfer Gavriel Lightfoot manning the 3 technique. The expectation for them and the rest of the D-line is to be physical and gap sound under Losay. That would be David Losay, the coach of the defensive line. Fitting the overall defensive identity under new DC Demetrius Sumler, which is to be more aggressive within the current 4-2-5 base, and like the edges, the primary assignment there is stop the opponent's run game first. Aztecs have a lot of depth on the defensive line that's solid enough for rotation, which Coach Losay says is the key to maintaining performance throughout games and the season. Unless, he says, a guy is playing well, getting the job done, and winning his one-on-ones, and then he gets to stay out there. Leaders backed by Krishna Clay and Amari Comier, who've pushed themselves. There's Tuawa To'oli'ili. He reportedly had a phenomenal summer. Really good job during camp, improving his game and being stout at the point of attack, and has also added some skill to his finesse pass rush game, according to Losay. They have some young guys with potential for the near future and beyond, but it's that the interior of the defensive line where the dirty work happens. Aztecs have stacked some big bodies there this fall. Finau spent the offseason intentionally adding some weight to his frame, thanks to his wife's home cooking, and some motivation courtesy of 2 little ones in the house.
So the crazy thing is when January came, I was like, man, I kind of want to get in weight. So I went from 285 and now I'm 320. So my plan was to train myself in that weight, so I got used to it. So by the time fall camp came, it felt like, nothing. So now I feel good, 320 feels good, and it doesn't feel like it's holding me down at all. Us polys, we love to eat, but my wife cooks for me every night, so I eat as much as I can. Yeah, I have two kids. I got an older daughter, she's 2, and I got a younger son, he's 1. I think it's just that extra push, knowing that you're not just playing for yourself anymore. I'm playing for my wife and my 2 kids, and I know if I'm not doing good, they're not going to do good. So that's kind of like my thing, is always in the back of my head is like, okay, you're not just playing for yourself anymore.
Finau says that extra weight for the trenches. His partner in the middle, Gavriel Lightfoot, describes the job up front defensively for us.
I think our responsibility is definitely stop the run and get after the passer. Coach Lou, whenever you go to inside fun, that's what we call it. Stop the run, stop the run, stop the run. That's all we do.
And Coach Losay likes what he has across the room.
Well, definitely, because of the physicality and the toll on the body that it takes, we're definitely looking at rotating guys in and out, But if there's a guy in there that gets a hot hand and is just tearing off and kicking ass and taking names, that guy will stay in. But definitely, you don't want to keep bodies fresh and have as many guys rolling in there as possible that can get the job done. But it's all about getting the job done and not just rolling guys to keep guys fresh. You have to get the job done.
Let's close off this segment with some descriptions from what really goes on up front that most fans never notice.
Well, there's a whole lot of grabbing, punching, kicking, screaming, biting, clawing, and everything. But it's the violent nature of the position. It's the violent nature of the game. We wouldn't have it any other way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be coaching the position or playing the position. But I think it's a big. When you can be violent in practice with the offensive line and still walk off the field and be brothers and have the camaraderie that this team has, knowing the understanding that even though we're being violent against each other, we're still pushing for one goal, being a band of brothers and still competing with each other to make each other better to when it ultimately counts on the field on game day.
I say I think it's a lot more violent than you guys think in there. It's definitely more violent. Hands are I don't even wear gloves no more. Hands get messed up all the time, so.
Honestly, you just got to be a dog. Like, the trenches ain't meant for everybody, and honestly, it's just the biggest dog is going to win at the end of the day. So big ups to our O-line too. We compete with them every day, and they're progressing, we're progressing. So I think as long as both us and the O-line keep competing, nobody's going to be able to stop us at all.
Woof. That's the interior under Coach Losay. Bigger, physical, and built to kill the run, occupy the defensive front, and give the rest of the defense the chance to fly around them and make some plays. All right, stick with us for more from fall camp, as that opening game of the season against Portland State September 5th will be here sooner than you think. Aztecs not the only football teams in the county gearing up. Heck, this week, CIF San Diego Section High School football game starting up Friday night. There's this little show on KUSI TV. Maybe you've heard of it, the Prep Pigskin Report. You can check out future stars of the game. Heck, wasn't one Lucky Sutton a former winner of the coveted Silver Pigskin Award? I think he was. At any rate, please tell your Aztecs friends to give us a spin wherever they check out their favorite podcasts. We do have an X account, so you can follow along with the handle at Aztecs_all_in. Our Gmail address, you can send us your sternly worded letters, is aztecsallin@gmail.com. For Randy Scovil, this is Steve Perez saying so long for now, but we will be back soon.